Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
It was a little before noon on Wednesday, October 28, 2009. Sharon Larson and her daughter Tammy stopped at the Summit Park Grange in Anacortes, Washington, when they saw something that looked suspicious. They noticed 2 cars, a white station wagon and a black SUV, parked back-to-back a couple of feet apart from each other in the sectioned-off area behind the Grange building. The back ends of both vehicles were open, and a man with dark hair, his arms wrapped around what looked like a large roll of plastic, was going back and forth between the 2 vehicles. It was odd enough that Tammy decided to call 911 to report a trespass, while Sharon wrote down the license plate number of the SUV as it was pulling out and leaving the parking lot. Skagit County Sheriff Deputy Patrick Duhame responded to the scene. The black SUV was gone, but the white station wagon was still there. The windows were up, but the car itself was unlocked. Deputy Duhame looked inside and saw a set of keys and prescription glasses on the seat. The back seat of the station wagon was down, and there was a blanket in the back, as though someone had perhaps been sleeping back there. He thought the car smelled like a dog had been inside of it, and there was dog hair on the seats. Deputy Duhame then examined the entrance to the lot and saw that one of the chain links had been cut. He walked back over to the vehicle and left some business cards on it, so whoever owned it would give him a call or would know that they had to move their car. Tammy gave him the license plate number they had written down for the SUV, so Deputy Duhame ran both license plates. The station wagon came back as belonging to 57-year-old Mark Stover, and the SUV came back to 42-year-old Michiel Oakes. Having done all he could do at that time, Deputy Duhame gave his business card to Tammy and Sharon and then left. As he was driving, he happened to pass a black SUV with the same license plate number he had just looked up. He made a U-turn, put on his lights, and stopped the vehicle. There was one man in the car. He was wearing a nylon pullover and sunglasses. There was light-colored dog hair on the left sleeve of his shirt, the same type of dog hair Deputy Duhame had seen in the abandoned station wagon. Deputy Duhame asked to see the man's driver's license, which the man handed over. His name was Michiel Oakes, the registered owner of the vehicle. Deputy Duhame explained why he had pulled him over, that he had been seen behind the Grange, and that he had been trespassing. The man seemed nervous and denied being there. He said he had stopped in the parking lot to use his phone, as he was looking for the nearby casino. But Deputy Duhame didn't believe him. He told him that he had to move the station wagon, and then he let the man go. Deputy Duhame would later be asked if he had seen anything in the back seat of the man's SUV.
At that point, do you recall anything about the interior of Mr. Oakes' vehicle that he was driving?
I got the impression that there was blankets or a sleeping bag in the back. His windows are tinted, factory tinted dark. I could see into the driver's window. I could see between the seats. I got the impression it was clothing or bags of clothing or a sleeping bag, but I couldn't see all the way inside. I thought it was sleeping, bedding, things like that from the station wagon.
Did you notice anything about his demeanor?
He was nervous.
Little did he know at the time that what he saw wasn't bedding. It was a body. This is Jillian, and you are listening to Court Junkie, episode 60. The next day, Teresa Vokes Michael called her fiancé, Mark Stover's work line. It wasn't a number she normally called, but she was worried. She hadn't heard from him at all the day before, and this would be the second day in a row he would be missing their normal daily 8 a.m. phone call. It wasn't like him. Mark owned and operated the most renowned dog training and boarding facility in the area, out of his home in Anacortes, Washington. He owned 4 acres of land that boasted indoor and outdoor kennels, a fenced area for the dogs to run, and a barn. He had a long list of clients, celebrity clients even, including Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, Chris Novoselic from Nirvana, and the late Chris Cornell from Soundgarden. The business had first started in the early 1990s, with Mark and his wife at the time, Linda Opdyke, opening up the facility on Kickett Island, an island that Linda's family owned, about 55 miles north of Seattle. Linda's father was one of the founders of Washington's largest winery, Chateau Ste. Michelle. They called their kennel Island Dog Adventures and offered certain dog luxuries like massages, pedicures, a raw meat diet, and weight loss programs. Mark and Linda split up in 2006, and afterwards, Mark eventually took control of the company and moved it from the island to Anacortes, where he operated it out of his home. Mark was a man of routine and was always on time. To be out of touch and not answering his cell phone for this long was definitely alarming. And what Mark's employees told Teresa when she called there only heightened her concern. They told her that they had found blood spots leading up to the house, that they hadn't been able to get a hold of Mark either. And then, most concerning, Mark's guard dog, Dingo, or Ding, was found loose on the property, having suffered what looked like gunshot wounds. Teresa immediately reported Mark missing, and when the missing persons report came through, describing Mark Stover in his white station wagon, Deputy Duhame immediately thought back to the trespassing call he had responded to the day before. He realized the white station wagon that was being reported as missing was likely the one he had seen behind the Grange in the locked area. So he drove back to the Grange to see if the station wagon was still there, but it was gone. In its place were the business cards he had left on it. A short time later, however, the white station wagon was recovered from the nearby casino parking lot, and sure enough, it belonged to Mark Stover. So they had 2 vehicles that had been seen in the Grange parking lot the day before, one belonging to Mark Stover and one belonging to Michiel Oakes. So the logical next step in the investigation was to find Michiel Oakes and see what he knew about Mark's disappearance. And the lead seemed pretty strong. Not only had their vehicles been together in the same lot at the same time the day before, but Mark and Michiel were connected in another way. Investigators learned, after talking to Mark's employees, that Michiel Oakes was dating Linda Opdyke, who happened to be Mark Stover's ex-wife. At about 7:40 p.m. on October 29th, Chief David Rodriguez and Sergeant Gene Davis with the Okanagan Police Department went to Linda's home in Winthrop, while Skagit County deputies worked on securing a search warrant for Michael's SUV. As soon as they pulled into the driveway, they saw that the SUV was there. Michiel Oakes and Linda were there too, and as Chief Rodriguez would later tell it, Michiel was acting nervous as they all stood together in the living room. Chief Rodriguez told Linda and Michiel that Mark was missing and that Skagit County police were looking for Michael's SUV. Linda told them that they were getting ready to leave for Portland, Oregon, but Chief Rodriguez asked them to wait until the search warrant came through. While they waited, Sergeant Davis went outside to use his cell phone, and Linda also left the room, leaving Chief Rodriguez in the living room with Michiel. Michiel told him that he had to go outside to roll up his car windows because it was raining, but since Chief Rodriguez had just been outside, he told him that it wasn't raining and that the SUV windows had been up when they pulled in. Michiel then became noticeably agitated and began looking around the house, saying he needed to find his pills.
Well, he didn't find what he was looking for. He got up, but then he asked me if he was under arrest.
And what did you tell him?
I said he wasn't under arrest. And he goes, can I go look for my pills? And I said, yes.
What happened then?
So the area where the living room in the house is attached to the dining room, which is then attached to the kitchen, which is all one big room. So he was searching in this 3 areas, which is one big room, looking in cabinets and drawers all through this one big room.
And what happened then?
Well, at that point, Miss Updike came back into this general area of the house and came up to me and asked me a question. I don't recall what that question was. I answered her question, and then I, trying to keep an eye on what Mr. Oakes was doing, and within that brief period of time that my attention was directed to her, I looked back through the room and he was gone.
It was dark out, and Michael had gone outside, not knowing that Sergeant Davis would be watching him as he opened the door to his SUV and removed a white plastic bag. Sergeant Davis ran over with his flashlight and asked him what he was doing. As he approached, Michael suddenly threw the bag over the embankment.
Asked him what he was doing, and he said something about looking for medication. And then naturally, again, bells and whistles are going off, and I asked him what he did looked suspicious, and it appeared that he was probably trying to hide something or destroy evidence. And then at that point, I detained Mr. Oakes, and he stated, why am I giving him the third degree at that point?
Sergeant Davis walked Michael back into the house, with Michael saying, I don't know what the big deal is. I was just getting some trash. Chief Rodriguez detained him, while Sergeant Davis went and retrieved the bag. Inside the garbage bag was a .22 caliber pistol and a bloody swatch of carpet that had been cut out of the SUV. Michael was arrested and taken to the Skagit County Jail. He would eventually be charged with first-degree murder. Later that evening, investigators searched Mark's home. They found bloodstains on the front porch, on the walls, on the carpet runners in the hallway, and in the bedroom. They found Clorox bleach and a spray bottle that appeared to have been used to clean up. They searched a BMW that Mark owned that had been parked in his driveway. They found Mark's driver's license and credit cards inside, along with 2 cell phones. According to phone records, the last call Mark made was the night before, at 7:30 p.m. on October 27th. Massive searches for Mark's body took place, but despite their efforts, prosecutors would have to go to trial without a body. But even though Mark's body hadn't been found, they were confident they had enough evidence that Mark was no longer alive and that Michael was the reason why. Michael had first met Linda in July of 2008. Linda had been looking for a guard dog, and Michael acted as the point person between her and a friend of his. He had previously owned a business that developed force-on-force training, and he had trained law enforcement and members of the military on close-quarters combat-related survival training. Initially, Linda had told him that Mark, her ex-husband, had been stalking and harassing her, and so she asked him to assess the steps that she had taken to ensure her safety. She had told Michael that Mark was obsessing over her. She called him highly intelligent and said she was concerned that his mental state would deteriorate. She gave Michael several documents, including a domestic violence protection order that she had taken out on him, transcripts of phone messages from him, and letters she had written to her local law enforcement. Linda and Michael eventually started dating in the spring of 2009, just months before Mark's disappearance. Going into Michael's trial, it seemed that it would be a pretty open and shut case. Linda and Mark had had a pretty contentious divorce, so it wasn't hard to believe that Linda's new boyfriend might want her ex-husband dead. But as the details of what happened started to come out at trial, it left many with more questions than answers. Michael's trial started in September 2010 at the Skagit County Courthouse. In her opening statements, Senior Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Rosemary Kaholakula told the jury that in order to understand this case, they had to understand the players. First, there was Mark, who was 57 years old at the time of his disappearance. He was a renowned dog trainer and hadn't been seen or heard from since October 2009. Then there was his ex-wife, Linda Opdyke, whom Mark loved very much. She said he was devastated when Linda decided to divorce him. She said he behaved stupidly and that he, quote, continued to make contact with her that culminated with Mark rummaging through rubbish at her house. That contact led to a stalking conviction where he was then forced to give up his guns. But although he was upset by all of that, by all accounts he had moved on and found someone else to love, she said. But she said Linda still formulated the belief that she was in danger from Mark. She was armed to the teeth, Kaholakula said. She had trained guard dogs and a security system at her house, and she hired Michiel Oakes to be her bodyguard at the end of 2008. She outlined the evidence the jury would hear and said that there were only two conclusions. 1, Mark is dead, and 2, the defendant killed him. After the prosecution's opening, Michael's attorneys told the judge that they wanted to reserve their opening statements until after the state presented their case. So the state then began calling their witnesses. They called Mark's fiancée, Teresa Vokes Michael, to the stand. She said she and Mark first met in October 2008 after being introduced to each other through mutual friends. She acknowledged that Mark's divorce with Linda was contentious, but said although he wasn't pleased with the proceedings, he was very anxious to be moving on. She last spoke with Mark on the night of October 27th. The next day, she became concerned after not hearing from him all day. She said their first phone call was usually at 8 a.m. each morning. She tried calling and texting him and even sent him an email, but nothing. The next morning, on October 29th, she called his work, and that's when she found out that his employees hadn't heard from him either. She testified that the previous weekend, Mark was upset and told her that, quote, things weren't right on his property. She said he was worried that someone was trying to kill him and that he knew he was being followed. He didn't want to leave a paper trail, and so he only used cash, and he would call her occasionally from his cell phone, but mostly from payphones. She told the court that Mark had complete disdain for gambling and would never set foot in a casino. It was very unusual for his car to be there, she said. Stephanie Poor, Mark's next-door neighbor, and also an employee who worked at the dog kennel, described what happened when she walked over to his house the morning of October 28, 2009. She said she walked over at about 8 a.m., but first she tried calling him, as she did every morning, but no answer. She wasn't expecting to see him or his car at the home. She knew he had early appointments that morning in Seattle, but when she arrived, she saw that his station wagon was parked in an odd spot, backed up to the house with the hatchback up. She spoke with one of the other employees, Melena, who told her that there was blood on the driveway leading up towards the house. That concerned her, and so she kept an eye on the house while she worked with the dogs at one of the play areas on the property.
Now, you indicated that you had been watching the house and kind of watching the car. What did you observe?
Well, the hatchback was up, and I saw who I believed was Mark because it was Mark's hat, coming and going from the house, carrying big things, putting it in the back of the vehicle.
Could you actually see him going in and out of the house? Because
Yes,
there's a picture of the trees in the way, so your vantage point was you could see that?
I could not see where he was going into the house, but I could see him behind the hatchback. The car was at such an angle that I could see with the hatchback up through the hatchback.
Okay. How long did that happen? How long was the person going back and forth and doing that?
Short time, maybe 5 minutes.
Stephanie told the jury that when Mark normally drives on his property, he drives slowly. In fact, she said he was a stickler for driving slowly on his property. But that morning, she watched as Mark's car shot down the driveway and almost peeled out when it hit the road. She said she waved to him, but got no response back. She told the court that initially, in her statements to police, she thought the man she had seen was Mark, but she now believes that it wasn't him. She was asked why she now believes that it was someone else.
The car was parked in a spot where I'd never seen it parked before. The behavior was not like Mark. Mark had a specific way of walking. It was not his walk. Mark would have stopped and talked to me to tell me what was going on. He was kind, he was courteous, he would not have wanted me to worry, and he would have stopped and talked to me. Because he had done so previously on days when there was obvious, distress to his dog.
And I think you mentioned a hat.
Yes, and he was, it was wearing Mark's hat and coat.
After the station wagon left, Stephanie went up to the house to use the bathroom. She surveyed the ground as she walked up the driveway, trying to find the blood that Milena had told her about. Before she got to the door, she said she could smell bleach, which was very odd, since she knew they never used bleach. She said it was overpowering.
As I walked into the house, I had a very unsettling feeling. I thought maybe Ding was in there, so I left the door open. And on going in, I saw 3 wet spots on the entry mats in the hallway, which were obviously had been cleaned and were blood. They had a red tint to them. I looked around the kitchen to see if there was anything amiss because it was an odd morning, and I surveyed the house. It didn't look like anything was out of place. It didn't look like there'd been a tussle or anything. I went into the bathroom. I went right as you go into the bathroom or the washer and dryer. I went into the bathroom thinking, well, there must be bloody towels or, bloody tissue or something in the bathroom.
Was it your thought at this point that the blood was human blood or not?
No, I believed it was Ding's blood.
Ding was Mark's guard dog, and he had had a tumor removed a couple weeks prior, so she assumed the blood was from that. She continued on with her day, never hearing from Mark. And the next morning, Thursday the 29th, she came back. But again, things seemed odd.
We were getting started with our day. I went the same as the day before I walked to work. My first stop was in the barn. Milena was distressed because Ding's food was in the fridge. It was our practice that in the evening we dish up Ding's food as well, leave it in the fridge. Mark comes home, he feeds the dog.
Why don't you guys feed the dog?
Why didn't we feed Ding?
Why don't you normally do that?
She's not a dog that would have looked lightly to strangers coming into her house. She was a very highly trained Royal Dutch police dog.
So what happens after you guys discover that Ding's food has never been given to Ding?
Well, it was confusing, and I believe I might have walked a dog, and then I went up to the house to go to the bathroom. And I had my head down because I was looking, at the ground. I had found a business card on the ground that I thought, gosh, that's odd that Mark must have been here. I missed this yesterday.
Was it his business card?
Yes, it was. I picked it up, and as I picked it up, I looked up at the door to the carport, and there stood Ding in full protective stance, growling at me.
Where in the carport was Ding?
Right at the back door.
And that's the side of the house?
That's correct.
Was that unusual for Ding to be outside like that?
Yes.
Why?
Because she is a highly trained protective dog. And Mark was a stickler about keeping us safe. And he would not have left her outside with us on the property.
Where is she normally?
In the house or with Mark.
She said she could tell Ding was hurt. She thought maybe she had had a stroke because her right side looked odd and she had a droopy eye. They tried to get a hold of Mark, but again, he wasn't answering. They were finally able to get a hold of Beth, a former employee who could handle Ding. She was able to get Ding into her car and took her to the vet. Milena Skultedy, another one of Mark's employees, testified that she was the first one to work on the morning of October 28th at about 7:50 a.m. She said she started cleaning the kennels when another employee, Amber, arrived. Amber's job was to take some of the dogs to Seattle, and so she was helping her get them ready to go. She was getting the dogs into the van when Amber had to go to the bathroom inside the house. Amber came back down a few minutes later and was irritated, saying that the door was locked. Milena testified that the door is normally unlocked, that it's the entrance that all the employees use to get to the bathroom. Milena said she thought that Mark was home and inside the house because his station wagon was still there. She testified that he was supposed to have left for his appointments by then, that he's usually gone by the time the employees arrive for the day. She said it was unusual because Mark was the type of person who was always on time, that he hated when people were late. While she was outside working with the dogs, she said that she too saw a man who she thought was Mark up by the house.
I saw, which I assumed was Mark, going in and out of the house and the station wagon in what seemed like a hurry. He was very fast-paced. I don't know if he was putting stuff in the car or taking stuff out. And by that time, he got into the driver's seat and drove down maybe 30, 40 feet, slammed on the brakes, put it in reverse, got out, went back into the house, came back into the car. He did that about 3 times. And finally, he drove out very fast and didn't wave, stop, or anything, which was very unusual.
Milena said she assumed it was Mark because she didn't have any reason to think it was someone else. But she said even if Mark was in a hurry, he would have waved or at least somehow acknowledged her. At about 10 a.m., she walked up to the house to go use the bathroom. The door was now unlocked. She described smelling a strong bleach smell and seeing wet spots that looked as though they had been cleaned. The next day, when she got to work, she saw that the dirty dish bowls they had left out the day before were still out, and so were 2 little sticky notes she had left for Mark. Jennifer Sheenan Lee, a sergeant with the Skagit County Sheriff's Office, said she responded to Mark's house after the missing persons call came through. She entered the home through the side door and said that in the entryway, there were several large stains on the mats that lined the hallway. The stains looked as though they had been cleaned, and there was a strong chlorine smell coming from the nearby bathroom. In the bedroom to the left, there were 2 smaller stains that appeared to have been cleaned up. Despite that, there were no signs of a struggle. She collected swabs and photographed the stained areas. She then called her chief to request that a detective respond to the residence. After she was there for about an hour, she left and drove around. She came across Mark's car in the casino parking lot, and she went and took photographs of it. It had been raining outside, and the driver's side window was down. There were keys, 2 pairs of eyeglasses, and some documents on the seat. On the outside rear of the car was a bloodstain. Julia Simmons, Mark's niece, testified that she and her mom had been staying at her Uncle Mark's house while he was missing. She said one Saturday they were going to a wine tasting to meet up with some of her uncle's friends when she saw something suspicious.
When I went outside, I was on the stoop in the carport, and when I looked down, the sun just kind of caught this casing just right, and I saw it for the first time. And there was a bench for a Suburban, like the 3rd seat, sitting in front of it, and I went around and I looked down, and I decided not to touch it. And so when we were in the car on the way to the wine tasting, we called Detective Luvera to have him come look at it.
Detective Dan Luvera testified that the casings found at Mark's residence, 3 .22 caliber shell casings by the carport, were all of the same CCI brand. He said he didn't find any guns or ammunition in Mark's house. But on cross-examination, he testified that Mark had 20 to 30 registered guns with the Washington State Department of Licensing, including 5 .22 caliber guns. He also said that a friend of Mark's was storing numerous guns for him. Detective Kay Walker testified that there were bloodstains on the wall in Mark's hallway, on a garbage can from the bathroom, and on the hose of a vacuum cleaner. She also testified about what was found during a search of Michael's SUV. She said they found a suitcase inside that contained a bulletproof vest, 9mm magazines, and a pair of freshly laundered jeans that had a faint stain on the knee. In a backpack also found in the SUV were a pair of shin guards with dog hair on them. Detective Meyer executed a search warrant at Linda's home and seized surveillance footage from her surveillance system. In the video, Michael can be seen leaving the house at 2:38 a.m. on October 28th. He doesn't return to the home until 11:31 p.m. Surveillance video from a Walmart near Mark's home from a few hours after Michael left Linda's home on October 28th was then shown to the jury. Michael's SUV pulls into the Walmart parking lot at 5:16 a.m. Michael then enters the store, wearing a black coat and jeans. He goes to the tools section and purchases ankle weights, an anchor line, a backpack, shin guards, and a camouflage sweatsuit. Then, a few hours later, at 9:43 a.m., surveillance video from a nearby Lowe's store shows Mark's white station wagon pulling into the parking lot. But Michael, not Mark, gets out and walks inside. This time, Michael's wearing a black fleece coat and camouflage sweatpants. He purchases a pair of bolt cutters and then leaves in Mark's car. Then later that day, at 4:51 p.m., Michael returns to the Lowe's, this time driving his black SUV and wearing black gloves and blue jeans. He returns the bolt cutters. During a search of Michael's SUV, Detective Meyer testified that officers found the Walmart receipt for his purchases. He said they found the backpack with the shin guards inside, but didn't find the anchor line, the camouflage clothing, or the ankle weights. In the rear of the vehicle, Detective Meyer said they found a cleaning manual for a Sparrow sound-suppressing silencer. Detective Ben Haglund testified that the white garbage bag that Michael threw from his SUV in front of Sergeant Davis contained a .22 caliber handgun manufactured by Browning Arms, a Ziploc bag with a square of carpet cut from Michael's SUV, a receipt from Lowe's, some clothing tags, a bloody napkin, and a balaclava, or ski mask. The manager at an Ace Hardware in Winthrop testified that Michael had purchased a .22 caliber Browning pistol on October 1st, 2009, and an employee from the hardware store said that Michael told him that he really likes .22 pistols and that he has a barrel that he can put on it so he can add a suppressor to it. Richard Wyant, a supervising forensic scientist, told the jury that the bullet casings found outside Mark's home were fired from the .22 caliber Browning. He said the 3 bullets recovered from Dingo's head also had the same characteristics as a bullet fired from Michael's .22 caliber Browning. Wyant then said that a bullet had also been recovered from Michael's bulletproof vest. The bullet was also a .22 caliber bullet, but he said he couldn't determine whether it came from the Browning. He said the bullet hole was in the middle of the vest, which he said was unusual. He pointed out that a silencer can affect the markings on a bullet. Karen Green, another forensic scientist, testified about the blood evidence found in Mark's station wagon, as well as in Michael's SUV. In the station wagon, she said there was blood on the black bumper, on the driver's seat, and on the carpet in the back cargo area. In the SUV, there was blood on the kick plate, the back hatch, and in the cargo area where a square of the carpet had been cut out. Christina Hoffman, a DNA expert, told the court that the DNA profile from the inside of Michael's SUV matched Mark's DNA. Michael's ex-wife, Jennifer Thompson, took the stand. She and Michael married in 2007, but divorced about a year later. Jennifer said she has 2 young sons from a previous marriage. Jennifer testified about her interactions with Michael on the days leading up to Mark's disappearance. She said that in mid-October 2009, she contacted Michael to ask whether he was absolutely certain that their relationship was over, and he told her that he wasn't. A few days later, Michael contacted her and told her that he would be in her area on October 24th and suggested they get together. She said he came over that day, and while there, he told her that he had some side work, a job that he was off to do, and that it was dangerous, and he was a little concerned. She said he texted her later that evening or early the next morning and wrote, "No worries, I'm safe. Job failed. But no job means no pay." He told her he may also be back in the area the following week. Jennifer saw Michael again on October 28th. He called her at about 12:30 that afternoon, and they agreed to meet up at a Starbucks in Everett around 1:15. She said Michael was typically very meticulous about his appearance, but that he looked disheveled when he arrived. Michael then said he wanted to go to the beach. He told her that his car was too full for her to ride in it, and so they drove in separate cars. Jennifer said she noticed that his SUV was caked with mud almost up to the windows, and that he usually kept his car clean. When asked what Michael was wearing, she said he was wearing a black fleece jacket that was covered in animal hair and jeans. They walked along the beach and talked for about a half hour, but she said his demeanor changed after he went into a nearby bathroom. When he came out, after being in there for what she said was a long time, he was noticeably stressed and worried.
And I think I asked what was wrong. And he said, I think I'm in trouble. And I said, like, real trouble or like paranoid trouble? And he said, like, felony 10 to 15 years trouble. And I didn't know if he was being melodramatic or if it was something real.
Prosecutor Kahola Kula asked her if he told her what the trouble might be.
He indicated that he was doing a job and that the people that were helping him, what was the order? He said I was doing a job and something went wrong. He made a mistake. Something that was not planned happened.
She said he told her that old biddies had seen him, and the people that were helping him are now not going to, and so he was all on his own. He told her he had been pulled over by a sheriff and that it was bad because in 24 to 48 hours, when the shit would be hitting the fan, his name would now be associated with that area, and that's why it was bad. She said at that point he was very stressed out. He was looking around and rubbing his hair. They then saw a police officer in the parking lot, and he got really, really freaked out, she said. She told him that he was being paranoid, that the officer wasn't there for him, and he told her, "You're right, it's just a guilty conscience type of thing."
The next thing that happened in the conversation was, I believe I made an inquiry again to the realness of this, because I didn't know what he was talking about. I just knew something was happening. And he indicated it was real. It was real trouble. And he had made at some point a reference to he needed to get over the mountains because he lived in Kennewick. Here he is on the west side of the mountains. He needed to get back. He needed to get out of the area. And I said, well, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And he said, I need to be in the area. I have a couple of hours to kill. My memory is about 6 p.m. he needed to be somewhere, and so he just had some time. I said, well, once you get home, how long do you need to be paranoid? How real is this? And he said, if I get pulled over, there's a 50-50 shot of me getting questioned. If I get questioned, there'll be certainly a trial, and if there's a trial, it's not going to be good.
She asked how long he had to be worried, and he said if a certain amount of time went by, he would probably be in the clear. He told her that he had to sterilize the items in his car because if he got pulled over and they found them, he could go to prison for life. She said she didn't know what it was that he was referring to. She was asked if she noticed anything about Michael's pants.
Did you notice anything about Mr. Oakes' pants?
Oh, yes. There was a rusty reddish stain on his right knee. And I made comment, I said, wow, it looks like you've got a dirty knee there. To me, it looked like blood. I didn't say blood. I just said, it looks like you have a dirty knee there. And he took his finger and he touched it. And he said, yeah.
Do you recall which knee it was?
His right knee. And it was like an oblong oval, about 3 inches. This on his jeans.
Jennifer said she needed to pick up her kids from daycare. Their conversation ended with Michael saying he was afraid of going away, and they discussed how it would affect his children. She said it was between 3:30 and 4 o'clock at this point. Later that night, he texted her at about 9 p.m. and said, "All is well, I'm safe." The next night, on October 29th, she got an email from him at about 6 p.m., an email that really seemed strange to her. It read, "Hey, it was nice to see you. It was great listening to the polka guy get rolling. Have a good evening." She said it was odd because it had nothing to do with what they had talked about earlier. There was no reference to the serious conversation they had. She got a call from Michael a few hours later at 9 p.m. He told her, "Hey, I only have a minute. I'm getting arrested," in the back of a police car. She said their conversation was very short. She said she checked later that night or the next morning to see if he had been booked into the Skagit County Jail after seeing an article about his arrest. Once she found out he was there, she called her parents. She said she was really upset when she saw what the charge was. She decided to call the jail. She told them, "My name is Jennifer Thompson, and I may have some information about one of the people in your jail." They took down her info, and then Detective Kay Walker contacted her. Detective Walker came to her house in Everett about an hour later with another detective. Ron Copley, a deputy with the Skagit County Sheriff's Office, said that when Michael was checked into the jail on October 30th, he underwent an initial medical screening, as all arrestees do. Michael told them that he had no medical problems or complaints, and that he was only taking an anti-inflammatory for neck pain. On cross-examination, the defense attorney pointed out that just because someone doesn't report an injury, it doesn't mean that they haven't suffered one. Copley agreed. When it was time for the defense to present their case, Michael's attorney, Corbin Valouz, told the jury that he would now provide them with the rest of the story. He said Michael had never pointed a gun at another human being before, and said he only did so in this case in self-defense. He described the contentious relationship between Linda and Mark, and said that Mark was convicted of stalking her in April 2008. He said that Mark had a gift for training animals, but that he was a dark and troubled man who was obsessed with wreaking havoc on Linda. When Linda told Mark in 2005 that she wanted to separate from him, he was furious, Valouz said. In fact, Linda was so scared of Mark that in December 2006, she fled the area and moved to Winthrop, where she thought she would be safe from him. But she was wrong, he said. On Wednesday, October 28th, he said Michael killed Mark purely in self-defense, and that Michael's training in force-on-force combat saved his life. But, he admitted, after Michael killed him, the things he did that day make no sense, but that he only did them so he could see the people that he loved again.
You're going to hear Michael testify about the things that he did that day, which make absolutely no sense. The things that he did that day, which make no sense when compared with the obvious option of leaving out the back door and heading off into the woods and disappearing. He decides he's got to play for time. It's just a matter of time, but he's got to play for what time he can get in order to see those people again.
He said Michael will testify and that the defense will prove that it was self-defense. Michael indeed took the stand to testify in his defense. He started off by telling the jury about himself, that he had been married for 18 years to his first wife, got sole custody of his 4 kids in 2005, and then met his second wife, Jennifer, in 2006. They got married less than a year later, and then got divorced less than a year after that. After his split from Jennifer, he met Linda about 3 or 4 months later, in July 2008. He said she was trying to buy a guard dog from a friend of his. She told him she was having problems with her ex-husband, that he was stalking her. Since he had a law enforcement training background, she asked him to judge the seriousness of the threat and to make sure that she had taken the steps required to meet that threat. She had a lot of written documents, videos, and audio tapes that he looked at. He said Linda told him that she went to self-defense training, had purchased a few firearms, installed an elaborate camera system at her home, and had purchased a protection dog. He said he went to her house to look over her security measures for her. He didn't feel like there was anything else he could do for her, but they continued talking over email. He said he had no expectation that this would turn romantic. He was 5'6", and she was 6 feet tall. Linda, quote, somewhat reluctantly agreed to go to dinner with him one night, and they became romantically involved. He said he first met Mark Stover in the last week of May 2009 at a Costco about a mile from his home in Kennewick.
I was coming out of Costco, and he was beside my car in the parking lot of Costco.
Did you recognize, what kind of car were you driving then?
I was driving the Suzuki.
And when you came up to the car, first of all, was this a school day?
Yeah, it was either a Tuesday or Wednesday, as I recall.
Okay, what time were you at Costco?
I believe it was about 10 a.m.
What had you done before going to Costco that day?
I had taken each of my kids to their school, the 3 separate schools for 3 kids, and then I had gone to the office, took care of some emails, and then went to Costco.
So when you came out in the parking lot, came up to your Suzuki, you saw this person.
Yes.
Did you recognize this person as Mark Stover?
I did.
And who spoke first?
He did.
And what did he say? And I know this is offensive, but you have to say it.
He said, "You're the guy that's fucking my wife."
He called it a one-sided conversation, said he didn't remember responding. He said Mark wanted something very specific.
He said that I was going to do something for him, and he said that I was going to get some wedding photos for him and provide them to him. And I don't think I said anything, but I just stood there. I was quite shocked. And he said, he continued and said that I was going to do what he wanted. And he began to describe he began to describe what my daughters were wearing. And
you mean school?
Yeah. That morning, that day, we had gone straight into the car in my garage and drove straight from there to their schools.
He told him after he retrieved the wedding photos from Linda, he was to meet him at the North Gate Mall on July 14. If he did that, everything would be okay with him and his kids. Mark then told him to leave. He said he remembered seeing in Linda's documents that Mark wanted those photos.
Had you, in the packet of material I showed you this morning, had you read information in there about how Mr. Stover seemed to be, I don't know if this is appropriate, obsessed with these photographs?
You know, I had seen mention of it in the papers. There was so much material. I remembered seeing it, but I didn't think anything particularly of it.
Michael described being very shocked after the confrontation and that he had a hard time thinking straight. He picked up his phone to call the police, but didn't. He said he had worked with the police for years, and he knew that he didn't have any evidence or proof that Mark had just threatened him. He told the court that a year earlier he would have called, but the fact that the police weren't helping Linda, even after he had seen all the evidence she had, made him think that they wouldn't help him either. He decided not to tell Linda. At the time, things had calmed down, and Linda was just starting to live her life again. He said he thought he could just get the photos himself and hand them off, but when he looked for the photos, he couldn't find them. He said he never told Linda about anything to do with Mark, including what happened on October 28th. Michael met up with Mark again at Northgate in July, as Mark had instructed. He thought maybe Mark had been messing with him, so he went to see if Mark would show up. It was a crowded public place, so even if Mark did show up, he figured it would be okay. He was sitting outside his car when Mark approached him. He said he told Mark that he didn't have the photos.
He said he was frustrated, but he was calm, and he said that I wasn't taking him seriously and that I needed to get the wedding photos and that I hadn't tried. And then he said he would, I think he said on that occasion, he said he would be in touch. I think that's what he said. Yeah, he said he'd be in touch, and that I was going to get the photos for him. And I believe on that occasion he made another sort of a sidelong cast about the kids.
They met for only about 5 minutes. Michael said he was armed at that meeting, and that he was perpetually armed ever since Mark had approached him at Costco. Michael said he was distressed because he now knew that Mark really wanted, quote, these silly pictures. His next contact with Mark wasn't in Washington state. He said he had talked to Linda about moving somewhere else. They were considering Montana, and so they went there and visited her parents in mid-August. They also looked at real estate there. They had stopped at a park so Linda and her protective dog, Sojo, could get out and exercise. And after dropping them off, Michael went on to a grocery store. He was in line to get coffee at a coffee shop located inside the store when he saw Mark.
And I was in line to get coffee and looked up and I saw Mr. Stover a short distance away right by the door, exiting the grocery store. And he stood there kind of staring at me and he motioned to me. And so I left the line and went outside to talk to him.
Did you, by the way, up until this point, I know that Ms. Opdyke told you that Mr. Stover was always armed.
Yes.
Did you assume he was?
I did.
Okay. Did you, up until this point, ever see him armed?
No.
Okay. He see you armed?
No.
Okay. So when you see him in the grocery store, where do you go?
We go out the door of the grocery store right outside the door.
And is there a conversation?
Yes.
And what is that conversation?
He was angry about us being in Montana, for one thing.
What did he say about that?
He said that Ms. Opdyke should know that Montana is his state and that we shouldn't think about relocating there. And that was what he said about that topic.
He said again, Mark threatened him.
It was in reference to setting up the next meeting. I believe it was when I told him that I couldn't make it to the next meeting and to the time that he originally demanded. And he said, if you don't take me serious, I'll prove, or this is close to what he said at least, I'll prove that I'm serious. You'll know how it feels to lose someone you love.
He said Mark told him to meet him again in late September. He didn't tell Linda about that encounter either, and in late September, he went to meet with Mark again in a church parking lot. He had grabbed a few photos of Linda and had brought them along so he had something to show Mark. It was late in the evening, around 11 p.m. He said he waited for about an hour, but Mark never showed. But a couple weeks later, he got a phone call from Mark. Mark told him to go to the church again with the photos at midnight on October 24th. He said his ex-wife Jennifer had also contacted him prior to that day, and so they had arranged to meet too, since he was going to be in the area. So on October 24th, he went to Jennifer's house at some point between 7 and 9 p.m. He said he told her that he was in the area because he had an important meeting. She asked if they could get back together, and he didn't want to say no. She said if he wanted to see her boys, they had to have a relationship. He was madly in love with Linda at that time and said he still is. He only wanted to see the boys. He left Jennifer's house around 10 p.m. and went to the church. He sat there for a while, and when Mark showed up, he said it was, quote, definitely a different meeting from the others.
How was he acting strange? How was he acting differently that night on the 24th than he had on these other occasions, which sound pretty strange to begin with? But how was he acting different?
The other times he seemed very much in control. He was angry or I guess, frightening in a way, but he seemed very much under control. And this particular evening, I mean, I thought he might take a punch at me or pull a gun or something. He was very, very agitated, not in control.
He told Mark he thought the photos were in the safe at Linda's house and that he didn't have the keys. Is this still about the wedding pictures? His attorney asked. Yes, he replied. Michael said the meeting lasted about 10 minutes. Mark instructed him to meet him again, this time at his house, just down the way from where they were, in less than a week. Michael said he texted Jennifer later that week and told her that his meeting didn't go okay. He said he was texting while driving and wrote, "No job means no pay." He said there had been discussion about him giving Jennifer money, and that's what he was referencing. He told the court that after his initial meeting with Mark, he took extra precautions to protect his children, including pulling them out of school, taking his kids to the shooting range, and talking to them about what to do if someone were to break into their home. He next met with Mark at their prearranged meeting on October 28, 2009. Mark had instructed him to park at the church by his house and then to proceed on foot from there. He said Mark gave him his address and told him to be there at 7 a.m. He said he left Linda's house at about 2:30 or 3 o'clock that morning. He told Linda that he was going to Kennewick. He arrived in the area sometime after 5 a.m. He said he first went to Starbucks and got his breakfast, and then went to a nearby Walmart. He wanted to go there to prep for his meeting with Mark. Michael went over his purchases, the shin guards, the camouflage, the anchor weights, saying he had a plan in case he had to escape from Mark. The plan involved escaping to a water tower that was not far from Mark's house.
I had looked at the Google Earth pictures of Mr. Stover's house. It's surrounded by woods, and I had tremendous anxiety about this change in going from public meeting places to his house. And I was very, very concerned about possibly needing to make some sort of on-foot escape through the woods from him and his dogs.
You bought the camouflage. By the way, why did you buy extra large camouflage?
It was the only size that they had.
Okay. Did you buy a rope that's been called an anchor rope?
Yeah, I had bought a rope with a carabiner on the end of it.
Okay, and the carabiner is what's sometimes called a D-ring?
Yeah.
What was that for?
That was to hook something to so that I could hook some kind of basically a grapnel device so that I could access the water tower.
Will you explain that to us?
Well, the water tower ladder is typically, I haven't seen that water tower, but typically the water tower ladders are elevated so that you can't access water towers, so you don't have kids that do spraying graffiti and falling off and things like that.
And what was the purpose of the weights?
My hope was to attach a weight to the D-ring and use it as if you will, a grapnel to basically access the ladder on the water tower.
He said the shin guards he got as a gift for Jennifer's boys. After he left Walmart, he went by the water tower. He said a fence was in the way, so he didn't get to the tower itself. But outside the fence, in the bushes, he left the rope and the weights. He then drove to the church. When asked if he had any photographs with him at this meeting, he said no. He had checked the safe and hadn't found any in there, so he was planning on just telling Mark that there weren't any photos anywhere. He wore a Kevlar vest and a black shirt, and a black jacket over the vest. He said he was armed with 2 firearms, a 9mm handgun, and a .22 caliber Browning pistol. He got to Mark's house within a minute of 7 o'clock. He went to the front door and knocked. He said he knew about Dingo, Mark's dog, and that he was a dog who was ferocious and would bite. Mark answered the door. The house was well lit. He said Dingo was there too. Mark told Michael to come inside, and so he did.
He led the way through, I guess it's the living room there.
Was there any discussion about anything at that point?
You know, I don't recall that he said anything at that point.
Okay, so here's a man that you know carries weapons all the time.
Yes.
Right? He's got a killer dog with him.
Yes.
You knock on the door, you just walk in his house.
Yes.
Sounds a little strange.
So far, in my experience with him, you did what he said, and he would be more calm.
Okay, and up until that point, did you ever see him with a gun?
I had not.
Okay.
Michael said he followed Mark to the hallway, and Mark told him to stand in the washroom. He then asked him about the photos.
He said, "Do you have the pictures?" And I said, "No." And I started to say something more, as I recall, and he just kind of waved me off. And he turned and went out the glass door there.
To the carport?
Yes.
Okay. When he goes out the door, does the dog go with him?
It did.
Okay. So what happened when he left the door? What happened next?
I heard him retreating away. I could hear him walking away from the door, and I waited for a moment, and I started worrying that he was going to get some other people or going to get a gun or something. And so I kind of stepped out and looked out the glass door to see if I could see where he was going, and I didn't see him in sight. And there was a door right there, almost opposite the washroom door where I was at. And I opened that door, and there was a bedroom in there, and there was a window. And I stepped in there, and I could see down the hill, and I could see him moving around with the dog. And as I recall, he went to a large, dark-colored van and got in it and started it, and then got back out of it and started back toward the house. And so I retreated, closed the bedroom door, and went back into the washroom and stood where I was left.
Michael stood there waiting for him to come back in, and then he heard another engine start and could hear a car moving in the gravel. Mark then came back inside without the dog.
I could hear him moving around, and then he came back to the washroom again, and he said, "You don't have the pictures," and he was very agitated. And I said, "I got in the safe, and they weren't there. There aren't any pictures." And I think he may have said then she would never have gotten rid of him.
What happened next?
He was he got more and more animated and got very close to me and was very angry and very loud. Oh, and when he came back in, I don't know if I mentioned, he locked the door when he came back in the house without the dog. And that frightened me quite a lot. But he kept kind of closing in on me, and I could feel myself wanting to back up from him. And then he kind of abruptly broke off and walked back out and back toward the main part of the house.
And why didn't you just walk out the carport door at that point?
I think, the thought was crossing my mind, I should just run.
Well, who's outside?
Dingo.
Okay.
He said it was one of those moments where your heart is pounding and seconds feel like hours. He said Mark then came back a couple minutes later, and this time he had a gun in his hand. They struggled, and Michael said he got shot in his vest.
I can't remember if I lunged and he shot. We tangled and I got shot.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you, do you recall what hand Mr. Stover had his weapon in?
Would have been the left hand.
Okay. Mr. Stover had the gun in his left hand.
He had it in that hand. He had his left hand.
So after he shot you, I'm going to ask you, if you could, with the court's permission, demonstrate what you did. Can we do that?
Well, we can try.
Michael got up and demonstrated what happened. His attorney pretended to have a gun in his hand, playing the part of Mark, and Michael lunged at him and tackled him to the floor. You can hear the spectators in the courtroom gasp.
So Mr. Wallace is he's Mr. Stover, he's holding the gun out, he's fired at you. Mm-hmm. What do you do? I don't think we were expecting that.
And then Mr. Stover was shot with his own gun, his attorney asked. Yes, he was, Michael replied. He said that after that shot, Mark fell.
He fell, and I was left holding the gun. And I stood there covering him for a minute with the gun, and he didn't move at all.
Where was he physically?
He was in the hallway. We had hit the wall, and he fell down and was laying in the hall.
So did you do anything to determine whether Mr. Stover was alive?
Yeah, I covered him for a moment, and I didn't see him breathing. And so I continued to cover him, and I took my glove off my hand and touched his throat, and he didn't have any pulse.
He said he wasn't sure how long he sat there. After a while, he got up and tried to figure out what to do. He said he paced around for a little bit. Mark wasn't bleeding at that point, at least not that he could see. He heard the engine running for the car outside and thought to himself that he needed to shut it off.
I went to the car to open up the driver's side door, and I'm going to switch off the engine, and then I'm thinking, why am I switching off the engine? And so I closed the door. I don't know.
The door or the hatchback?
The driver's side door.
Okay.
And then I don't know why I'm there, so I turn around to walk back in, and I'm back at the carport door, and I hear something behind me, and I turn around, and there's the dog. And
what was the dog doing?
It was standing not far away from me, and it was staring at me very, very intently, and it was making some sounds and kind of approaching. And so I drew the gun that I had on my right side.
Is that the first time you drawn your gun?
Yes.
And what gun was that you had on the right side?
That was a .22.
So did you shoot Dingo?
Dingo came at me, and I shot a couple times until it stopped coming at me. And then I stopped shooting, and it stopped coming toward me, and I stopped shooting.
Okay, this is the Browning. So what side do the shell casings eject from?
The right side.
Did you think to pick up your shell casings?
No.
He said Dingo turned then and ran off. He went back inside, and by that time, he could see a little bit of blood on Mark's face. He looked outside and could see people walking around. He figured they had heard the gunshots and would be coming to the house any minute now. He thought about calling the police, but Mark had told him that he owned the cops, and he thought that it might be true. He didn't think they would believe him. He knew the clock was ticking and knew he would be arrested. He wanted to hide the body so he would have time to go see his kids before being arrested. He picked Mark up and carried him out to the back of the station wagon and laid him there. He put the gun in Mark's vest pocket. He got inside the station wagon and saw a hat sitting on the driver's seat. So he put the hat on and started down the driveway. He could see people milling around outside. He drove to the Grange and saw that there was a chain blocking the entrance, so he went to Lowe's. He doesn't remember when he changed into the camouflage pants he was seen wearing on the Lowe's surveillance video, but he said he did it after noticing he had a blood spot on the knee of his pants. He got bolt cutters and a lock from Lowe's, and then went back to the Grange. He cut the chain link, parked the station wagon, and then walked back to the church parking lot to get in his car. He felt like he couldn't just leave Mark there, so he went back to the station wagon and looked in the back. He saw all sorts of stuff back there, including big plastic bags and duct tape. He used the plastic and slid it under Mark's body, and then slid the body over to his car. Just as he was pulling out in his SUV, he saw two women looking at him and writing down his license plate. He said he was on his way to the water tower to pick up the stuff he had left there when he was pulled over by the police officer. Mark's body was in his back seat. When asked why he returned the bolt cutters to Lowe's, he said he has no rational explanation for why he did that. After leaving Lowe's, he went to see Jennifer in Everett. He said he told her he had wanted to see the boys, but she came alone.
At some point, she described you going into a bathroom and being there for a long time. Before that, you were acting somewhat normal. You came out, you were melted down. What happened in the bathroom?
That was at the ferry terminal. We had parked there. We were walking around a little bit, and she was not taking it. She wasn't even taking anything I was saying seriously. I wanted to see the boys, and so I went to the bathroom, and in there, just the whole weight of everything hit me, and I was throwing up for a while, and then I came back out.
Okay. Was there ever any discussion with Jennifer about what had occurred?
Yeah.
What was that discussion?
What was the discussion?
Yes.
I told her that I had my meeting, but everything went wrong. Everything went wrong, and I was going to get blamed for it, and that I was going to be arrested for sure and might go to prison.
Give her any more details?
I don't think so.
After leaving Jennifer, he drove around for a while and then went back to the Grange. He said he was shocked that Mark's car was still there. He had thought there would have been police there by now. So he parked his car with Mark's body still in the back and drove Mark's car to the casino parking lot. He then went to dispose of Mark's body. This would be the first time that Michael would publicly say what he supposedly did with Mark's body.
When I'm walking away from Mr. Stover's car, I see some kind of a boat in the water just near there. There's water right there. And so when I get back to my car, I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I can't pack him around. I have to go see my kids. And so I drive down there, and there's a kind of a dilapidated looking dock thing. And I got my car as close to that as possible and muscled him out and dropped him in the water.
He said the gun was still in Mark's pocket, in his vest. He said he couldn't see that it was dark outside. He threw things from the car into the water. He then drove to Winthrop, stopping to throw up a couple times, and went to Linda's. He said he told Linda that he had a really bad day, but he didn't tell her what had happened. He did his laundry, but said he knew he was going to be arrested. He described what happened when police showed up the next day. He knew both officers, knew Sergeant Davis from incidents Linda had with Mark, and he had hung out with Chief Rodriguez socially in the past. When asked what he had hoped would happen at his meeting with Mark on the 28th, he said he had hoped that Mark would say he didn't care about the pictures anymore, and then he could just leave. On cross-examination, Michael testified that he had checked out the water tower on the internet and that he had left the rope and ankle weights there in case there was a problem. He said he had the camouflage clothing in his backpack in case he needed to make an escape through the woods to the water tower, because camouflage is quite useful for that. Skagit County Prosecutor Rich Wyrick brought up Michael's testimony about him having taken off one of his gloves in order to check Mark's pulse. He asked why Michael would have been wearing gloves in the house, and he said because he was cold. He said he never smelled any bleach in Mark's house and that he didn't use any while he was there. He said he didn't attempt to clean up anything. When he got to Linda's house, he cut a piece of carpet out of his SUV because it smelled like blood, and then he put it in the plastic bag to throw away later. So before I continue on with the defense's case, I want to recap Michael's testimony really quickly because it can be a little confusing. Michael testified that he went to meet up with Mark at Mark's house at 7 a.m. on October 28th at Mark's instruction. He parked the car in the church parking lot and then walked over. According to his testimony, he was tremendously nervous about this meeting since it wasn't in a public place. But he decided to go because he was hoping that he would just let Mark know that he didn't have the photos and that would be the end of it. According to his testimony, he went to Walmart beforehand and picked up some camouflage pants, anchor weights, and an anchor line. He bought these items in case he needed to escape. He figured he would wear the camouflage, run through the woods, and then climb up the water tower. He also went armed with 2 guns, including a .22 caliber, and wore a bulletproof vest. When he got there, Mark asked about the photos. He told him he didn't have them, and then Mark was angry. Mark left him in the house while he went outside, seemingly to start up one of his cars or maybe to retrieve a gun. Either way, when he came back, he was holding a .22 caliber gun. He fired it, hitting Michael in his bulletproof vest. Michael immediately lunged at him. They fought over the gun, and Michael shot Mark with Mark's own gun. He said everything from there was a blur, and for some reason, he decided to go outside where he heard one of the car engines running. And when he went outside, he saw Dingo, Mark's guard dog, coming at him. He said he then pulled out his own gun and fired 3 times until the dog stopped coming at him. He then loaded Mark's body into Mark's station wagon and drove out of there. And now that we've heard Michael's side, we're going to hear the rest of the defense's case, which may or may not help corroborate Michael's story. David Huber, a family law attorney who represented Linda in her divorce from Mark, testified that Mark had been requesting wedding photos from Linda. In September 2007, he sent a letter to Mark that was admitted into evidence. The letter said, quote, "You asked that she send you wedding photos and CDs. For clarity, please direct your communications regarding all matters to my office in writing." It also said, "The wedding photos and CDs you have requested were previously disposed." He testified that the letter was in reference to a voicemail that Mark had left for Linda. In another letter to Mark, dated January 23, 2008, he wrote that continued attempts to contact Linda, whether through writing, phone calls, or in person, would be considered harassment and would lead to appropriate additional actions. Huber told the court that he wrote that because Mark had made repeated attempts throughout the entire time he represented Linda to contact her and to contact him by telephone. He said in his 23 years of practice, he had never run into anybody like that. He said this guy was outside the norm. He said he wrote several letters to Mark regarding this. In a letter Mark had written to him in December 2007, Mark wrote about the wedding photos.
Dear Mr. Huber, in response to your letter dated 12/12/07, in regards to the final settlement, the disposition of the capital W wedding photos and CDs, it is my belief that your client is misinformed you on the status of the aforementioned. Ms. Updike knows that the photos were to be returned to me, and lack of this conveyance is unacceptable. It is my belief that your client is still in proprietary control. Your client has no right to destroy community property that is still in dispute, and if she has $5,000 should be paid to me for recovery. These photos et al., as important as any of the other aspects of this case, and will not have any less diligence than any other.
On January 1st, 2008, another letter he received from Mark was read out loud.
Dear Mr. Huber, mailed packet today, 1/10/08, faxed addendum A to exhibit of findings of facts and conclusions of law. And for now, quote, the rest is silence, end quote, Hamlet. Respectfully submitted, Mark Stover. That still brings a chill to me.
Why does that bring a chill to you, Mr. Huber?
You know, he's quoting Shakespeare in a very, what appeared to me, sinister way, and I took it as a threat.
He said he never sought a no-contact order because he didn't want to become a target of Mark Stover.
I thought that that would expose me and to his thinking I was his problem.
With what result?
That I would be at risk.
Linda Opdyke, Mark's ex-wife and Michael's girlfriend, testified about various instances of stalking and harassment she said she experienced with Mark after their split. She said she and Mark had 2 wedding albums, a candle, and a wedding photo in a frame, and that after their divorce, Mark initially told her that he didn't want them. So she threw them away in her dumpster. Not long after that, she received a phone call from Mark, who was mad that she had thrown them away. It surprised her because he had initially told her that he didn't want them. In August 2007, she was living in Winthrop, and she woke up to something unusual happening.
It was within a week of telling him that I wanted the divorce finalized, and I woke up with Mark in my bedroom. It was about 9 o'clock in the evening, and I was asleep, and he came into my bedroom and told me he had just driven 18 hours straight from a fishing trip in Montana and realized that he could not let the marriage go. And he was very emotional, very distraught, on his knees next to my bedside, and he had a pistol in his hand and laid it on the pillow next to my head and was very disturbed.
She said he eventually settled down and left a few hours later. Mark didn't have a key to her residence, and she said she has no idea how he gained access to her home. She told Mark not to come over anymore, but in September 2007, she saw him again at her barn. He told her he was there to go fishing, but he was in his Porsche and didn't have any fishing equipment with him. She told him to have a nice time fishing and got in her car to go home, only to realize he was following her there. Once they got to her house, Linda said she invited him in for a glass of wine and took the opportunity to tell him that she was serious about him not coming over to her residence anymore.
What happened then?
He proceeded to talk about wanting to work on the marriage some more. I did not want to talk about that with him. He was there for maybe 10 minutes. And then I told him he needed to go. He became very distressed and was very anxious. And as I got to the front door of my residence and opened the door, he exposed himself to me, and it was just weird. And I pushed him out the door and closed the door behind me.
She recalled another instance a month later, in October 2007. It was hunting season. It was about 7 o'clock in the morning, and she was getting out of her shower when she heard her dog frantically barking.
The dog that I have was out in the yard, and she was barking excessively in a tone that I've never heard her bark before, very alarmed. And I thought maybe it was a deer, but it was different than how she's ever barked before. And I looked out the window, and I see Mark on a hillside behind my house, probably 70 feet or so up the hill behind my house, and he's got his hunting rifle, and it's scoped. He's looking through the scope, pointing the rifle at me through the bathroom window.
Were you clothed or unclothed?
I was unclothed. I had just gotten out of the shower.
What happened then?
I couldn't believe that I saw this. I went to the front door, and I called Sudjo in immediately, and I saw him run away.
3 days later, she had another encounter with him.
I was getting ready to go to an event in Winthrop, and I was in the shower, and I get out of my shower, and my master bathroom is attached to the master bedroom. And as I step out of the shower, I see Mark standing there, and he's in my bedroom right at the entrance into my bathroom.
Once again, do you have any idea how Mark Stover gained access to your bedroom that day?
I firmly believe at that point in time he had taken the key off my counter. And
sustained as to speculation.
Were the doors locked?
The doors were locked, yes.
Did Mark Stover have a key to your residence by your permission?
No.
She said she was shocked and horrified. She told him it was very inappropriate for him to be there and told him he needed to leave immediately. She said she got dressed and went to leave, and Mark was standing in her driveway.
And what happened?
He did go out the door. I got dressed very quickly and wanted to get out of there. I went out my door to depart my residence, and Mark is standing down in the driveway. I go out my front door and down a stairwell, and he was standing on the driveway and very frantic, very panicked and very intense. And he told me that he was could not let the marriage go, and that he couldn't let me go. And he was very agitated, and I told him that I didn't have time to speak with him at that moment, that I was heading out to an event, and I was just trying to keep things very calm. He then grabbed me by my shoulders and shook me and said, I can't let you go. And I just tried to calm him down, and I said, take your hands off me, and he settled down a little bit, and I was able to get in my car and depart.
In November 2007, Mark had told her he was going to go hunting for the weekend. She said she had a feeling that Mark would find his way over to her place, so she stayed at a friend's house. She went back home the next morning to get some more items so she could keep staying at her friend's house. And when she pulled in her driveway, she saw Mark's car there.
Well, I was hopeful that he did not see me, so I backed out of my drive and proceeded to drive down into Winthrop in hopes that I could evade interaction with him. However, he did see me, and he came flying down my driveway and down the road, following me at a rapid speed into Winthrop. And at that point, I picked up my cell phone and I told him that he was stalking me, harassing me, frightening me, and that he needed to leave the area. He was in a rage at that point. He said that it was my fault that I was living in Winthrop. He said that it was his hunting grounds and had been for 35 years. I proceeded at that time to tell him, I then pulled over on the side of the road and I asked him to pull over and not get out of the vehicle. I told him that if he did not turn around and leave the valley immediately, that I would be calling 911. At that point, he went into an absolute rage, and I did hang up the phone, and I did proceed to call 911.
She said the police then contacted Mark. Later that day, she wrote a letter to him and requested that he please respect her boundaries. She said he could contact her through writing and said that she would do the same. She said it was for the best during this time. She CC'd her divorce attorney. She wanted to keep a record on file. Later that month, she received a cancellation form for her healthcare policy, signed by Mark. She and Mark had an agreement that she would remain on the business insurance until their divorce was finalized, which it hadn't yet been. Mark had written a note on the form saying, "Next time, don't call the cops on the guy that controls your health care." Linda also recalled a time where she went to dinner with one of her girlfriends, and then later that night had been intimate with a man named John. The next morning, she received a phone call from Mark, giving her details of what she and John had done the night before. When she went back to John's house, she saw tire tracks where a car had been parked. They were the same size as the ones on Mark's car. She also saw footprints around the fence line, which looked like Mark's shoes. She said she knew that Mark had been there. She decided to then get a recorder to start recording phone messages she received from him, and she also got a security system for her home. A few days later, John emailed her and told her that he couldn't be in a relationship with her due to the safety of himself and of his family. He encouraged her to take the necessary steps for her own safety. That letter was admitted into evidence. A phone message from Mark from November 30th, 2007 was also admitted into evidence. In the message, he asked for the wedding photos to be sent back to him. Quote, "By the way, if you want to see some slides, you better send the pictures." She said the slides were referencing old family photos of hers that she had left at their home on Kickett Island, where Mark was still living at the time. On December 2nd, 2007, another voice message from Mark referencing the photos. Quote, "It would be smart of you to send those pictures if you want to pick up anything here." On December 6th, 2007, she wrote a letter to the Okanagan Sheriff's Department. She wanted to let them know that she was going through a divorce and that if Mark was ever on her property, she would be asking for assistance. She told them that Mark was usually armed with a concealed handgun. On January 22nd, 2008, she received another phone message from Mark. Quote, "You know I can hurt you too, and I know how to do it. I'll tell you that right now. This is war. This is goddamn war. You're wrecking my life. You've wrecked my life enough. If you want it, you've got it. If it is the second to last thing I do." She said she was terrified when she listened to that. A few weeks later, on Valentine's Day, 2008, another phone message from Mark. She read the transcription out loud.
If I, for whatever means, find out that you are still in possession of those wedding things, I don't care if it is 5, 10, or 20 years from now, I'm going to see you big time. You got your goddamn divorce, but I better not ever find out that you were in possession of those wedding pictures. I will never forget this, and you know I'm a guy that can hold a grudge until I'm dead.
In early March 2008, Linda said she found 3 pages at the end of her driveway that had been photocopied from her diary that had been inside her home. By this time, she had been giving the police documentation of what she said Mark was doing to her. Then, on March 18th, 2008, another incident.
That morning, I was planning to take a walk with my neighbor, Ruthie Hagemeister, with our dogs, and I walked down to the bottom of the driveway to put my garbage in for pickup, and
Do you remember what time of morning it was?
I think it was about 10:30 in the morning.
Okay, please go ahead.
I then walked back up to my home. Ruthie and I were going to meet about 5 minutes later. And as soon as I walked in the house, I received a call from Ruthie, and she indicated to me that she was in the process of confronting somebody that was stealing my garbage at the bottom of my driveway. She informed me that he was taking the garbage. She said his name was John. She described him to me, and I knew immediately that the description was Mark Stover. She said that he had a protection dog in the back of the vehicle, and she was going to call 911.
She said Mark was arrested and charged with stalking and theft. After his arrest, she went back and reviewed her surveillance footage. She saw Mark on video at about 2:30 that morning, before the garbage was stolen. Surveillance footage was shown to the jury. Mark could be seen walking on her property along her house. At one point, he has a shirt pulled up over his head. Later that day, on March 18th, she received another phone message from Mark after he had been arrested. The message said, in part, "This is a very interesting birthday I'm having today. I don't know what I'm about anymore, but I'm about to give up." She obtained a domestic violence protection order at this point. It was made final in April of 2008. In mid-June 2008, she wrote a letter to the Okanagan County District Court in which she stated that she was very concerned that Mark was still in possession of firearms, although the domestic violence protection order states that he is not to be in custody of such. She received a letter back saying that they had received her inquiry, that they didn't see any violation of the protection order, and that they weren't going to do anything. In a victim impact statement she submitted in support of extending the protection order, she stated that Mark, quote, "will always be a threat to me," and she believes that he was mentally unstable. Linda said she had told Michael about all of these incidents prior to October 28, 2009. On cross-examination, the prosecutor had Linda clarify that Mark wasn't arrested the day he took her trash on March 18th, that he was just issued a citation for theft, but that after Linda then submitted a written timeline to the sheriff's office of all the times she said Mark had harassed her, he was then charged with stalking. The theft charge was eventually dropped, and Mark entered an Elford plea and then was convicted of stalking. The prosecutor pointed out that the charge had been based on what Linda had written and put together herself for the sheriff's office. Mark never admitted to stalking, and that instead, he said in his statement that he never meant to frighten her. As a result of his conviction, he received 2 years probation and had no violations on record of that. The prosecutor then handed Linda her divorce papers she had signed. On them, there was a question about whether there had been any allegations of domestic violence, and Linda had written no. Linda said the stalking started in August of 2006, immediately after she said she wanted a divorce. She hadn't reported anything to police until November 2nd, 2007, and in that report, all she complained of, the prosecutor said, was that Mark was in her driveway and that he kept showing up unannounced. There was nothing mentioned about any other incidents. Linda agreed that the last time she saw or heard from Mark was at the protection order hearing in 2008. Regarding Michael, she said she loved him and still does. When he was arrested, she assisted in helping him find a lawyer. Linda said that law enforcement searched her home twice. She was waiting with Chief Rodriguez while the first search was going on. She admitted to asking him what the difference was between Michael's charges and if any of those applied to self-defense. Prosecutor Kahalakula then questioned her about her cooperation in the case.
You refused to speak with my office, correct?
Under legal counsel, yes.
And in fact, when we tried to talk to you, you refused to provide any information, and this is September 8th, 2010, about anything except for your name, your address, your date of birth, that you knew Mr. Stover, and the date of your separation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You refused to provide any information as to whether you even knew Mr. Oakes, correct?
That is correct.
And you did not provide any information regarding this alleged harassment by Mr. Stover, correct?
That is correct.
During the trial, however, she changed her mind and came forward just a week prior to giving her testimony.
Now, you changed your mind last week, correct?
Yes.
After the state had put on evidence for approximately 2 weeks, correct?
I'm not sure the time of the trial.
You don't know when this trial began?
I know when it began, but I'm not counting days right now.
Okay. Would it make sense, given that you know when the trial began, that it was about 2 weeks into trial that you decided you would testify, correct?
If that's the case, yes.
And the person that you advised was Mr. Oakes' lawyer, correct?
Yes.
Now, in refusing to speak about this case with my office, you did meet with the defense lawyers in this case a couple of times, right?
Briefly, yes.
In fact, you indicated last week when we spoke for the first time that you had met personally with Mr. Oakes' lawyer on 3 occasions, one of which involved a substantive conversation about your relationship with Mr. Stover.
I would not go substantive, but yes, they questioned me on my relationship with Mr. Stover.
And you also have had at least 2 phone calls with Mr. Oakes' lawyer, correct?
I would believe that is correct.
It would also be accurate to state that after you decided to testify last week and you needed to come in for an interview with my office, the lawyer that you showed up with was not yours, but was Mr. Oakes' lawyer, correct?
No, I had my attorney with me.
Isn't it correct that you walked in with the defense attorney first and your lawyer showed up about half an hour later?
Yes, for the interview, correct.
Prosecutor Kolakula then told her that she didn't have to worry about Mark anymore.
In terms of this case, you had a contentious relationship with Mr. Stover, right?
It became very abusive, yes.
And the divorce lasted from August when you filed to January when it was finalized, correct?
Yes.
And that would be 2008, right?
Correct.
And from your perspective, Mr. Stover continued to be a problem, correct?
He was unstable, and yes, it was very cyclical.
And so in your opinion, Mr. Stover continued to be a problem, correct?
At what time frame?
After the divorce?
Yes.
And the fact is that in this case, you don't have to worry about Mr. Stover now, do you?
It appears to be that case.
And in that sense, the defendant helped you out, correct?
No.
Isn't it true that if this is a case of self-defense, it gets you off the hook, too?
What do you mean by that?
You indicated you were concerned about your own potential liability in this case. If a jury were to find that this was self-defense, you wouldn't have any more liability either, would you?
I have no liability in this case.
Nothing further.
Michael's 2 daughters testified that at the end of the school year in 2009, just months before his confrontation with Mark, Michael seemed more cautious and jumpy, and that the following fall, he took his 2 youngest children out of school. During the state's rebuttal, Detective Meyer testified that the body of water where Michael said he dumped Mark's body had been searched at least twice. He said the area was behind a fence barrier and that it was unusable and not safe because of rot and damage. He said that on October 28, 2009, the water was only 4 feet deep and that during a search of the canal, they used a sonar scanner. If a body had been there, they would most likely have seen it, he said. After more than 3 days of deliberations, the jury came back with their verdict.
In the Superior Court of the State of Washington, County of Skagit, in the matter of State of Washington versus Michael Glenn Oakes, case number 09-1-00909-0, verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant, Michael Glenn Oakes, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree, premeditated murder as charged, signed, dated this 22nd day of October 2010 by presiding juror Marla Sanger.
Michael's kids could be heard crying in the courtroom after the verdict was read. He turned around to comfort them as they sobbed. Linda sat next to them and comforted them too, as Michael was led away from the courtroom in handcuffs. At Michael's sentencing, Mark's fiancée and other loved ones spoke highly of him, calling him intelligent and compassionate. They said he had moved on after his divorce from Linda, and they were heartbroken to see his character trashed during the trial. Michael apologized to them, as well as to his own family, saying that he had made a series of very poor decisions that led to a compromising situation. He said the remorse he carries with him is sincere and heartfelt. Before he sentenced him, Judge Rickert said the pieces don't fit very well in this case. He said he has more questions now than he did when they picked a jury. He called Michael's actions after he killed Mark an absurdity and said there are parts of his story that he flat out doesn't believe and never will. And beyond that, Judge Rickert questioned why the body hasn't been found. If Michael acted in self-defense, he asked, why not provide the gun and the body? The cruelty of depriving the family of Mr. Stover's remains, the fact the family will never have resolution, is tough for me to swallow. Michael was sentenced to 26.5 years in prison. In 2015, Michael's appeal was denied. And meanwhile, Mark's body is still missing. I know many of you will likely be wondering about the fate of Mark's dog, Dingo, after she suffered 3 gunshot wounds. From what I've been able to find, Dingo did not die from those gunshots. And that's all for this episode. I'd love to know what you think about this case. Do you believe Michael's self-defense defense? Or do you agree with the state's case? What do you really think happened that morning? Let me know by tweeting me at CourtJunkiePod, emailing me at podcast@courtjunkie.com, or joining my Facebook discussion group at courtjunkie.com/Facebook. As a reminder, if you want to hear these episodes early and ad-free, please consider donating as little as $1 a month to this podcast. You can go to courtjunkie.com/support. That's courtjunkie.com/support. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.